The lower maintenance deck of Station Arcturus 7 smelled like burnt metal and recycled air. Marcus Webb knelt beside a malfunctioning coolant valve, his worn toolkit spread across the grated floor, his jumpsuit stained with grease and hydraulic fluid. The fluorescent strips overhead flickered intermittently, casting shadows that danced across the cramped corridor lined with pipes and conduits. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a dark smear. His knees ached. He was 43 years old, and every day he felt it in his joints, in the persistent fatigue that never quite left him. But he didn't complain. Complaining changed nothing. "Valve 37 Delta is still leaking," he muttered into his comm badge, his voice hoarse. "I'll need to replace the seal completely, gonna take another hour." Static crackled in response, then a bored voice answered. "Acknowledged. Webb, when you're done there, check the atmospheric processors on Deck 12. They've been running hot all week. Copy that." Marcus closed the comm channel and returned his attention to the valve. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, disconnecting the corrupted seal and examining the threading. This was his life now, crawling through the bowels of a galactic station, fixing things no one else noticed until they broke catastrophically. He was invisible to the aliens who walked the pristine upper decks, the diplomats and merchants and warriors who shaped the fate of star systems. He was just the human engineer, the maintenance guy, the one they called when their toilets backed up. His hand stilled for a moment and he glanced at the small holoframe clipped to his toolkit. Two faces smiled back at him. His children, Emma and Tyler, 10 and 8 years old, frozen in a moment of laughter at the Habitat Park 3 months ago. Their mother's eyes stared out from Emma's face, and Marcus felt the familiar ache settle in his chest. Sarah had died 2 years ago. A shuttle accident. Quick, they said. Painless, they said, as if that made it easier. Now it was just him. A single father raising 2 kids in a station where humans were barely tolerated, working double shifts to afford their cramped quarters in the human sector, trying to give them something resembling a childhood while the galaxy moved on without them. He forced himself to focus. The seal needed replacing. He had work to do. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, and Marcus glanced up to see 2 figures approaching. His stomach tightened. He recognized them immediately. Krez'thar and Solnix, both members of the station's security detail. Krez'thar was a Korvax, a species known for their immense size and strength. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his muscular frame covered in dark blue scales, his eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence. Solnix was a Threen, shorter but no less intimidating, with 4 arms and a carapace that shimmered like oil. They stopped in front of Marcus, looking down at him with undisguised contempt. "Still crawling around down here, human?" Krez'thar rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "I'm surprised you haven't gotten crushed by your own incompetence." Solnix clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Humans. So weak, so fragile. I heard one of them broke 3 ribs just carrying a supply crate last week." Marcus kept his eyes on the valve. "Just doing my job." "Your job?" Krez'thar sneered. "Fixing pipes. How noble. Tell me, human, do you ever wonder why your species was allowed into the Galactic Council at all? You have no strength, no natural weapons, no advanced technology you didn't steal or beg for. You're parasites." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. "Look at him," Solnix said, leaning closer. "He won't even defend himself. Pathetic." Krez'thar kicked the toolkit, scattering wrenches and screwdrivers across the floor. "Oops, clumsy of me." Marcus closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears, the anger rising hot and sharp in his throat, but he swallowed it down. He had kids to feed. He couldn't afford to lose this job. "No problem," Marcus said quietly, reaching for the scattered tools. "Accidents happen." Krez'thar snorted. "That's right. Keep your head down, human." "That's all you're good for." The 2 aliens walked away, their laughter echoing down the corridor until it faded into the hum of the station's machinery. Marcus gathered his tools slowly, methodically, his hands shaking slightly. He hated this. Hated the disrespect, the mockery, the constant reminders that humans were considered the lowest rung on the galactic ladder. But what could he do? Fight back? Get himself thrown off the station? Leave his children orphaned? No, he would endure. That's what humans did. They endured. He returned to the valve and finished the repair in silence. An hour later, Marcus made his way to Deck 12, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with practiced ease. The atmospheric processors were housed in a massive chamber at the station's core. a cathedral of machinery where recycled air was filtered and reoxygenated for the thousands of beings who lived and worked on Arcturus 7. The chamber was uncomfortably warm, and the air had a faint metallic taste. Marcus ran a diagnostic scan on the nearest processor unit, frowning at the readout. The heat exchangers were operating at 87% efficiency, not critical, but concerning. If they degraded much further, the entire deck could experience life support failures. He was deep into the repair, recalibrating the thermal regulators, when he heard voices approaching. Not just any voices, these were different. Commanding, authoritative. Marcus glanced up and froze. A group of high-ranking officers had entered the chamber, their uniforms gleaming with medals and insignia. At their center walked a figure that made every other being in the room seem small by comparison. Matron Krez'thar. She was a legend, a living myth. Standing 4 meters tall, her body was a sculpture of pure muscle and armored hide. Her species, the Dralnath, renowned across the galaxy as the fiercest warriors ever to walk the stars. Her skin was a deep crimson, marked with ritualistic scars that told the story of 100 battles. Her eyes burned like molten gold, and her presence radiated an almost physical force. She wore the armor of a war matron, black and silver plates, adorned with the sigils of a dozen conquered worlds. At her side hung a plasma blade as long as Marcus was tall. The officers accompanying her spoke in hushed, reverent tones. Marcus had heard the stories. Krez'thar had never lost a battle. She commanded a fleet of 12 warships. She had personally killed an enemy warlord in single combat, tearing him apart with her bare hands. And she hated humans. Marcus tried to make himself smaller, hoping she wouldn't notice him. But fate, as always, was unkind. Krez'thar's gaze swept across the chamber and landed on him like a hammer. "You," she said, her voice a deep, resonant growl. "Human." Marcus straightened slowly, setting down his tools. "Yes, Matrona?" She approached, each footstep shaking the floor. The officers followed at a respectful distance. When she stopped in front of him, Marcus had to crane his neck back just to meet her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Repairing the atmospheric processors, Matrona." "They've been running hot." Krez'thar's lip curled in disgust. "Of course, humans always scurrying in the dark fixing things, like insects." She turned to one of her officers, a sleek Valtorian with silver skin. "This is what the Council allows now. Vermin crawling through our stations pretending to be useful." The officer inclined his head. "The humans have proven adequate in maintenance roles, Matrona." "Adequate," Krez'thar repeated, her tone dripping with contempt. She looked back at Marcus. "Tell me, human, have you ever fought in battle?" Marcus hesitated. "No, Matrona." "Have you ever commanded a ship, led troops, conquered an enemy?" "No, Matrona." "Then what use are you?" She leaned closer, her breath hot against his face. "Your species is weak, fragile. You have no claws, no fangs, no armor. You cannot survive in hostile environments without your precious technology. You are prey pretending to be predators." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides but kept his voice steady. "We do what we can, Matrona." Krez'thar laughed, a sound like thunder. "What you can? How inspiring." She straightened, addressing her officers again. "This is why humans will never be respected in the galaxy. They have no strength, no honor. They are parasites feeding off the achievements of greater species." Marcus felt something crack inside him. He knew he should stay silent, knew he should let it go. But the words came anyway, quiet and firm. "Strength isn't just about muscles, Matrona." The chamber went silent. Krez'thar turned slowly, her golden eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" Marcus met her gaze, his heart pounding. "I said strength isn't just about muscles. There are other kinds of strength. Endurance, ingenuity, compassion." For a moment, Krez'thar simply stared at him. Then she threw back her head and laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the chamber. "Compassion. The human speaks of compassion." She looked at her officers, who shifted uncomfortably. "This is what they believe. That kindness and empathy make them strong." She turned back to Marcus, her expression cold. "Let me tell you something, human. In the galaxy, compassion is weakness. The strong survive, the weak perish. That is the only truth." Marcus said nothing. Krez'thar leaned down until her face was level with his. "If you truly believe compassion makes you strong, then you are even more pathetic than I thought." She straightened and turned away. "Finish your repairs, insect, and stay out of my sight." She strode from the chamber, her officers hurrying to keep pace. Marcus stood alone in the humming machinery, his hands trembling. He took a slow, shaky breath and returned to his work. But something had changed. Deep in his chest, beneath the fear and humiliation, a spark of defiance had been lit. And it would not be extinguished. Marcus returned to his quarters well past midnight, exhausted and still shaking from the encounter with Krez'thar. The human residential sector was located in the outermost ring of Station Arcturus 7, where the artificial gravity was slightly weaker and the walls were thinner. It was the cheapest real estate on the station, and it showed. He palmed the door scanner, and the lock disengaged with a soft hiss. The small apartment was dark except for the glow of a nightlight in the corner. Marcus stepped inside quietly, setting his toolkit down by the door. "Dad?" He turned to see Emma sitting up in the narrow bunk she shared with her brother. Her dark hair was tousled from sleep, and she wore the worn pajamas that were getting too small for her. Tyler remained asleep beside her, his small chest rising and falling steadily. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus whispered, crossing to her. "What are you doing awake? I heard you come in." She rubbed her eyes. "You're late again." "I know, I'm sorry. Had some extra work to finish." He sat on the edge of the bunk, and Emma immediately leaned against him. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Did something bad happen today?" she asked softly. "You look sad." Marcus managed to smile. "I'm fine, Em. Just tired." "You're always tired." He couldn't argue with that. "Go back to sleep, okay? School tomorrow." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, why do the aliens hate us?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd been dreading this conversation, but he'd known it was coming. Emma was smart. Too smart. She noticed things. "They don't all hate us," he said carefully. "Some of them just don't understand us yet." "But they do," Emma insisted, her voice small. "I hear them in the corridors. They call us names. Yesterday a Korvax told me humans don't belong in space." She looked up at him, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, brimming with tears. "He said we should go back to our dirty little planet and stay there." Marcus felt rage coil in his chest, hot and vicious. He wanted to find that Korvax and break every bone in his body. But he couldn't. He was just a maintenance worker, a nobody. "Listen to me," he said, cupping Emma's face in his hands. "What they say doesn't matter. You know why?" She shook her head. "Because they're wrong. Humans belong here just as much as anyone else. We're smart. We're brave. We don't give up no matter how hard things get. And one day, the galaxy is going to see that." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You're going to show them, Em. You and Tyler, and all the other human kids growing up out here. You're going to prove that we're not weak." "But we are weak," Emma whispered. "Compared to them, they're so much stronger." "Strength isn't just about muscles," Marcus said, echoing the words he'd spoken to Krez'thar. "It's about heart. It's about standing up even when you're scared. It's about protecting the people you love." He pulled her into a tight hug. "You've got more strength in your little finger than most of those aliens have in their whole bodies." Emma sniffled against his chest. "Promise?" "Promise." She was quiet for a long moment, then murmured, "I miss Mom." Marcus closed his eyes, fighting back his own tears. "I know, baby, I miss her too." They sat like that for a while, father and daughter, holding each other in the dim light of the tiny apartment. Eventually, Emma's breathing evened out, and Marcus gently laid her back down beside her brother. He pulled the threadbare blanket over them both and kissed each of their foreheads. Then he retreated to the small kitchenette and collapsed into the single chair at the table. He buried his face in his hands, allowing himself a moment of weakness, a moment to feel the crushing weight of everything he carried. He was so tired, tired of the work, tired of the mockery, tired of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. But he couldn't quit, couldn't give up, because Emma and Tyler needed him, and he'd be damned if he let them down the way the galaxy had let humans down. The next morning, Marcus walked Emma and Tyler to the human sector's makeshift school before heading to his shift. The school was a converted storage bay, barely large enough for the 30 human children who attended. The teacher, Mrs. Oliveira, was a kind woman in her 60s, who'd been an educator back on Earth before emigrating to the stars. "Morning, Marcus," she greeted him warmly as the kids filed inside. "How are you holding up?" "Getting by," he said with a tired smile. "How are they doing?" Mrs. Oliveira's expression grew somber. "Academically, they're brilliant. Emma especially. She's reading 3 grades above her level, but emotionally," she sighed, "it's hard for them here. The other species' children, they can be cruel." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Has something happened? Nothing physical, but the words hurt just as much. She placed a hand on his arm. "They need hope, Marcus. All of them. They need to believe that being human means something. I tell them that every day. I know you do, but they need to see it too. They need examples of humans doing great things. She smiled sadly. Unfortunately, the galaxy doesn't give us many opportunities to be great. Marcus nodded slowly. She was right. Humans were relegated to the lowest positions in galactic society. Maintenance workers, janitors, manual laborers. The prestigious jobs, scientists, diplomats, military officers, went to the superior species. We'll find a way, Marcus said quietly. We always do. Mrs. Oliveira squeezed his arm. I believe you. Marcus's shift that day took him to the upper decks for a change, a rare occurrence. One of the council chambers had requested repairs to their holographic projection system, and apparently every other engineer was busy. The council chambers were magnificent. Soaring ceilings, walls of polished starstone, floors that gleamed like mirrors. Marcus felt profoundly out of place in his grease-stained jumpsuit. He was halfway through the repair when he heard raised voices from the adjacent corridor. Curious, and with nothing better to do while the diagnostics ran, he edged closer to the doorway. Through the partially open door, he could see a meeting in progress. Council members from a dozen species sat around a massive circular table, and at the head of the table, dominating the room with her sheer presence, was Krez'thar. The humans are a liability, she was saying, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. They contribute nothing of value to the Galactic Council. They have no military strength, no technological innovations we cannot replicate, no resources worth exploiting. They are dead weight. A slender Valtorian diplomat spoke up. Matrona, with respect, the humans have proven surprisingly adaptable. Their engineers are adequate at best, Krez'thar interrupted. Any species can learn to turn a wrench, Counselor. That does not make them valuable. A Threne representative clicked his mandibles. The Matrona has a point. The humans were admitted to the Council as an act of charity, shall we say. Perhaps it is time to reconsider their membership. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Another voice, a Korvax admiral, rumbled agreement. Their military is laughable. A single Dralnath frigate could conquer Earth in a matter of days. They have no place among warrior species. Then what do you propose? The Valtorian asked. Expulsion. Relocation, Krez'thar said coldly. Send them back to their homeworld. Restrict their access to the star lanes. Let them develop at their own pace, if they survive at all without burdening the rest of us. That would be a death sentence, the Valtorian protested. Earth's resources are nearly depleted. Millions of humans live off-world now. Sending them back would cause mass starvation. Krez'thar shrugged. That is not our concern. The strong survive. The weak perish. If humanity cannot sustain itself, then perhaps it deserves extinction. The chamber fell silent. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his mind reeling. They were talking about condemning his entire species, millions of people, his children. The diagnostic chime behind him pulled him back to reality. He forced himself to move to finish the repair with trembling hands, but his mind was far away, churning through the implications of what he'd heard. The galaxy didn't just disrespect humans, it wanted them gone. That evening, Marcus sat at the tiny kitchen table with Emma and Tyler, helping them with their homework. Tyler was struggling with basic algebra, and Emma was reading a history text about the formation of the Galactic Council. Dad? Emma said suddenly, looking up from her book. It says here that humans were the last species admitted to the Council, and it took 50 years of negotiations. That's right, Marcus said absently, guiding Tyler through a problem. Why did it take so long? Marcus hesitated. How much should he tell her? How much truth could a 10-year-old handle? Because some species didn't think we were ready, he said carefully. Because we're weak, he met her eyes. Because we're different. And people, alien or human, are often afraid of things that are different. Emma frowned, processing this. Then she said, But we're not scary. We're just us. I know, sweetheart. So why do they still hate us? Marcus set down the stylus he'd been using and pulled both children close. Listen to me, both of you. The galaxy doesn't understand us yet. They think strength is about claws and teeth and armor. But we know better, don't we? Tyler nodded solemnly, even though Marcus doubted he fully understood. Human strength is different, Marcus continued. We're strong because we love each other, because we don't give up, because we're willing to do the hard work that nobody else wants to do. He looked at Emma. One day they'll see that, I promise you. How? Emma asked quietly. How will they see it if they won't even look at us? It was a fair question. And Marcus didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we have to keep trying. We have to keep showing them who we really are." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm scared, Dad." "I know. Me too." Tyler's small voice piped up. "But you said we're brave." Marcus smiled despite himself. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, buddy. It means you do the right thing, even when you are scared." "Oh." Tyler considered this. "Okay." They sat together at the small table, 3 humans alone in a galaxy that had no room for them, holding on to each other because it was all they had. And in that moment, Marcus made a silent vow. No matter what it took, he would find a way to protect them, to give them a future, to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. He didn't know how, but he would find a way. 3 days after Marcus overheard the council meeting, the station's routines continued unchanged. He reported for his shifts, repaired broken systems, endured the casual cruelty of aliens who saw him as little more than a tool, but something had shifted inside him. The knowledge of what the council was planning, the potential extinction of his species, sat like a stone in his chest. He couldn't tell anyone. Who would he tell? The other human workers. They were already struggling, already afraid. Adding to their fear would accomplish nothing. The council. They were the ones planning humanity's demise, so Marcus carried the secret alone and it ate at him. On the 4th day, everything changed. Marcus was in the mid-level engineering bay, recalibrating the station's power distribution nodes, when the alarm sounded. Not the standard maintenance alert, this was different, sharper, more urgent. His comm badge crackled to life. "All personnel, this is Station Command. We have a priority situation. War Matron Krez'thar's flagship, the Crimson Talon, has experienced a catastrophic systems failure during docking procedures. The ship is venting atmosphere and losing power. All available engineers report to Docking Bay 7 immediately." Marcus's blood went cold. A ship that size venting atmosphere. There would be hundreds of crew members on board, maybe thousands. He grabbed his toolkit and ran. Docking Bay 7 was chaos. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Alarms wailed. Station security was trying to maintain order as panicked crew members from the Crimson Talon evacuated through the docking collar, many of them injured, all of them terrified. The flagship itself was a nightmare. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see the massive vessel listing to one side, trails of frozen vapor streaming from dozens of hull breaches. Emergency force fields flickered and died. Entire sections of the ship were going dark. A Threen supervisor spotted Marcus and grabbed him with 2 of his forearms. "You, human, we need engineers inside that ship now. The main reactor is destabilizing. If it goes critical, it'll take out half the station." Marcus's mind raced. How long? Maybe an hour, maybe less. We've already sent in 3 teams. 2 didn't make it out. The 3rd reported that the damage is worse than we thought. Primary systems are failing across the entire ship. What about the crew? Still evacuating. But there are pockets trapped in the lower decks. No power, no life support. The Threen's eyes were hard. "We're writing them off. The priority is stopping that reactor." Marcus stared at him. "Writing them off? There are people in there. There's no time to save everyone. We save who we can and prevent a larger catastrophe." The supervisor shoved a datapad into Marcus's hands. "Here are the schematics. You're going in with the 4th team. Get to engineering, stabilize the reactor, and get out. That's the mission." Marcus looked down at the datapad, then back at the crippled ship. His instincts screamed at him to refuse, to stay safe, to think of his children. But he saw the faces of the evacuating crew members, the terror, the pain, and he knew he couldn't walk away. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The supervisor nodded. "Good. Your team is assembling at Airlock 3. Move." The 4th engineering team consisted of 6 beings. Marcus, 2 Korvax engineers, a Valtorian systems specialist, a Threen mechanic, and a young Drolnath technician who looked barely old enough to be out of training. They suited up in emergency gear, reinforced jumpsuits with built-in respirators and mag boots, and entered the airlock. As the door cycled open and they crossed into the Crimson Talon, Marcus felt the temperature drop immediately. The ship's environmental systems were failing. The corridors were dark except for emergency lighting. Debris floated in the zero-gravity sections where the artificial gravity had failed. The air smelled like burnt plastic and ozone. "Stay together," the lead Korvax, a grizzled veteran named Throck, commanded. "We head straight to engineering. No detours, no heroics." They moved through the ship in grim silence, navigating by the light of their helmet lamps. Twice they passed sections where crew members had been caught by sudden decompression, bodies frozen in the vacuum, their faces twisted in final agony. The young Dralnath technician vomited inside his helmet and had to stop to clean it. "Keep moving," Throck growled. They reached a sealed bulkhead blocking their path. The Valtorian specialist worked quickly to bypass the lock, and the door groaned open. Beyond it was a long corridor sloping downward toward the engineering section. Halfway down they heard voices. Throck held up a hand and the team stopped. The voices were faint, muffled, coming from somewhere to their left. Marcus consulted the datapad's schematics. "There's a crew quarters section through that wall. Looks like it's sealed off from the main corridor." "Not our problem," Throck said, starting forward again. Marcus didn't move. "There are people in there." Throck turned back, his expression hard. "Our mission is the reactor, nothing else. We can't just leave them." "Yes, we can, and we will." Throck's voice was ice. "The reactor destabilizes in less than 40 minutes. If we waste time trying to play hero, everyone on this ship and half the station dies. That's basic math, human." The Threen mechanic clicked his mandibles in agreement. "The Korvax is right, we have priorities." Marcus looked at the wall, hearing the voices beyond it. They were crying out for help, begging. He thought of Emma and Tyler, trapped and alone, calling for him, and he made his decision. "You go," he said quietly. "I'll catch up." Throck stared at him. "You'll die in here." "Maybe, but I can't leave them." "You're a fool." "Probably." For a moment, Throck looked like he might argue. Then he shook his head in disgust. "Fine. Die if you want. The rest of you, with me." The team moved on, leaving Marcus alone in the flickering corridor. He turned to the sealed section and examined the door controls. They were dead. No power. He'd have to cut through manually. He pulled a plasma torch from his toolkit and got to work. It took 7 agonizing minutes to burn through the reinforced door. His hands were shaking and sweat poured down his face inside the helmet. When the door finally gave way, he pulled it open and peered inside. The crew quarters were in shambles. A dozen beings huddled in the darkness. Korvax 3 and even 2 Dralnath warriors. They were injured, terrified, and had clearly given up hope. "Come on!" Marcus shouted. "I'm getting you out of here." A Korvax female looked at him with disbelieving eyes. You came back for us?" "Yes." "Now move." They didn't need to be told twice. Marcus led them back through the corridor, retracing his steps toward the docking bay. The journey was slower with the injured, and every minute that passed brought them closer to disaster. They reached the main corridor when the ship shuddered violently. Sparks exploded from a nearby conduit, and the emergency lights flickered. Over the comm system, a mechanical voice announced, "Reactor destabilization in 15 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately." "Go," Marcus urged the survivors. "Straight down this corridor, take the first left and follow the green markers to the docking bay." "What about you?" the Korvax female asked. Marcus looked back toward the engineering section. Throck's team had gone down there. If the reactor went critical, they'd be vaporized. "I have to help the others." "You'll never make it in time." "I have to try." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and ran deeper into the dying ship. The engineering section was a cathedral of machinery, most of it now sparking and failing. Marcus found Throck's team gathered around the main reactor core, which glowed an ominous red. The Valtorian specialist was frantically working at a console, while Throck and the others tried to manually vent coolant into the overheating system. "What's the situation?" Marcus called out, joining them. Throck looked up in surprise. "You're alive, for now. What do you need?" "The primary coolant lines are ruptured," the Valtorian said without looking up. "We're trying to reroute through the secondary system, but the controls are fried. Someone needs to manually open the valves in the sub-level access tunnel." "Where?" The Valtorian pointed to a hatch in the floor. "Down there, but the tunnel is flooded with radiation. You'd be dead in minutes." Marcus looked at the reactor, then at the terrified faces of the team. He thought of Emma and Tyler, thought of the promise he'd made to always come home to them, but he also thought of the thousands of lives on the station, the children in the human sector school, Mrs. Oliveira, all the people who would die if this reactor exploded. He thought of Krez'thar's words, "The strong survive, the weak perish." Maybe she was right. Maybe humans were weak, but weakness didn't mean worthless. "Tell me which valves," Marcus said, moving toward the hatch. "Human, wait," Throck started. "Which valves?" Marcus repeated. The Valtorian rattled off a series of coordinates. Marcus memorized them, pulled open the hatch, and descended into the darkness. The sub-level tunnel was a nightmare. Alarms screamed. Red warning lights flashed. Marcus's radiation detector immediately maxed out, and he felt a sick warmth spreading through his body. He was being cooked from the inside out, but he kept moving. He found the first valve and forced it open with shaking hands. The second, the third. Each one felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His vision was starting to blur. Blood dripped from his nose. The fourth valve was jammed. Marcus threw his whole weight against it, screaming with effort. It gave way and coolant hissed through the pipes. He collapsed against the wall, gasping. He could barely stand. The radiation sickness was overwhelming. Over his comm, he heard the Valtorian's voice. Coolant flow restored. Reactor temperature dropping. It's working. Marcus closed his eyes. Good. Get out of there, Throck shouted. Now! Marcus tried to stand. His legs wouldn't obey. I don't think I can. Move, human. He crawled. Inch by agonizing inch, he dragged himself back toward the hatch. His vision tunneled. The world spun. But he kept going. Hands grabbed him, the young Dralnath technician and Throck, pulling him up through the hatch. They half-carried, half-dragged him out of engineering and back toward the docking bay. The last thing Marcus remembered before the darkness took him was Throck's voice, softer than he'd ever heard it. You crazy, brave fool. Marcus woke to white light and the steady beep of medical monitors. His entire body ached with a deep bone-level pain that made breathing difficult. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Every muscle screamed in protest. Easy, a calm voice said. Don't move yet. You're in the station medical wing. Marcus turned his head slowly and saw a Valtorian doctor standing beside his bed. The alien's silver skin gleamed under the harsh lights, and his large eyes studied Marcus with clinical interest. How long? Marcus managed to rasp. 3 days. You've been unconscious since they brought you in. The doctor consulted a holographic display hovering beside the bed. Severe radiation poisoning, multiple organ damage, cellular degradation. Honestly, I'm surprised you're alive. Most species would have died within hours of the exposure you received. My kids are fine. They've been here every day. Your daughter especially. She's quite persistent. The doctor's expression softened slightly. You have visitors waiting, but first I need to explain your condition. Marcus braced himself. The radiation damage was extensive, the doctor continued. We've stabilized you, but there will be long-term effects. Chronic pain, fatigue, possible organ failure within a few years. He paused. I'm sorry, we did everything we could. Marcus closed his eyes. A few years, maybe less. He'd known the radiation would kill him eventually, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Can I see my kids? The doctor nodded. I'll send them in. But Marcus, he hesitated. What you did was extraordinarily brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. Just did what needed doing. Most beings wouldn't have. The doctor turned to leave, then stopped. War Matron Krez'thar has been asking about you. She wants to speak with you when you're able. Marcus's stomach tightened. Why? I don't know. But she's been insistent. The doctor left, and moments later, Emma and Tyler burst through the door. Dad! Emma threw herself at him, and Marcus bit back a cry of pain as she hugged him. Tyler was right behind her, sobbing openly. Hey, it's okay, Marcus murmured, wrapping his arms around them both despite the agony. I'm okay. They said you almost died. Emma's voice was muffled against his chest. They said you went into a radioactive place and saved everyone. I did what I had to do, sweetheart. But you could have died. She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. You could have left us alone. The accusation cut deeper than any radiation. I know. I'm sorry. Tyler looked up at him with wet eyes. Are you going to die, Dad? Marcus felt his heart break. Not today, buddy. Not for a long time. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Emma wasn't fooled. She was too smart. The doctor told Mrs. Oliveira. I heard them talking. You're sick now, really sick. Marcus cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. Whatever happens, I'm going to be here for you, both of you, for as long as I can, I promise. But you promised Mom you'd always take care of us, Emma whispered. How can you do that if you're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus pulled them both close again, letting them cry. He had no good answers. He'd made a choice in that radiation-flooded tunnel, and he'd make it again. But that didn't make the consequences any easier to bear. They stayed like that for a long time, 3 humans clinging to each other in a cold medical bay, knowing their time together had just become finite. On the 5th day, Marcus received his second visitor. The door to his room opened, and War Matron Krez'thar entered. She had to duck to fit through the doorway, and her presence immediately dominated the small space. She wore her full ceremonial armor, polished to a mirror shine, and her golden eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. Marcus tried to sit up straighter, wincing. "Don't," Krez'thar said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Remain as you are." She stood at the foot of his bed, silent for a long moment. Then she said, "The crew you saved from the sealed quarters, 12 beings, they would be dead if not for you." Marcus said nothing. "Throk's engineering team, 6 beings, including Throk himself. They would have died when the reactor exploded if you hadn't opened those valves." Krez'thar's jaw tightened. 4,317 crew members were on my ship. Because of you, 3,942 survived. I'm glad they made it," Marcus said quietly. "Glad?" Krez'thar repeated the word as if testing its taste. "You sacrificed your life for beings who have shown you nothing but contempt, for a species, my species, that has openly advocated for humanity's expulsion from the Council." She leaned forward slightly. "Why?" Marcus met her gaze. "Because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing." Krez'thar's expression hardened. "And now you're dying, slowly and painfully. Was that the right thing?" "I have 2 children," Marcus said. "If I'd let those people die, if I'd let that reactor explode, I would have been teaching my kids that some lives matter more than others, that we only help people who are kind to us." He shook his head. "That's not the lesson I want them to learn." Krez'thar was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When I first met you, human, I called you weak. I said compassion was weakness." Her voice dropped. "I was wrong." Marcus blinked in surprise. "What you did required a strength I do not possess," Krez'thar continued. "Physical power, that is easy. I have crushed enemies with my bare hands. I have conquered worlds. But you walked into certain death to save people who hate you. You chose to sacrifice yourself for strangers." She looked away. "That is a courage I have never known." "It wasn't courage," Marcus said. "I was terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it." Krez'thar turned back to him. "You have given me much to consider, Marcus Webb. I don't understand. I have spent my entire life believing that strength determines worth, that the weak deserve to perish. But you have shown me that I was measuring strength incorrectly." She straightened to her full height. "I came here to tell you something. The Council was planning to vote on humanity's expulsion in 3 weeks. I was leading the effort." Marcus's blood ran cold. So he'd heard correctly. "I have withdrawn my support," Krez'thar said, "and I will speak before the Council on humanity's behalf." Marcus stared at her, speechless. "I do not know if it will be enough," Krez'thar admitted. "There are many who still believe humans are unworthy, but I will try." She placed a massive hand on the foot of his bed. "You saved my crew. You saved my ship. You may have saved my life, though I was not aboard at the time. I owe you a debt, Marcus Webb, and I will do everything in my power to ensure your species survives." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Thank you." Krez'thar nodded slowly. "No, thank you. You have taught this old warrior that there are many kinds of strength." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your children, Emma and Tyler, yes?" "Yes. They will be taken care of. I give you my word. Whatever happens, they will be protected." She left before Marcus could respond. He lay in the silent room, his body broken, his future uncertain. But for the first time since he'd come to this station, he felt something unexpected: hope. The news of Marcus's actions spread through the station like wildfire. Within days, everyone knew the story. The human engineer who'd walked into a radiation zone to save Krez'thar's ship. The being who'd sacrificed himself for aliens who despised him. Human workers throughout the station began to notice changes, small ones at first. A Korvax security officer, who'd routinely harassed humans, suddenly started nodding respectfully when they passed. A Threen merchant who'd refused to serve humans began accepting their credits. In the corridors, aliens stepped aside instead of forcing humans off the walkways. It wasn't universal. Many aliens still sneered and mocked, but something had shifted in the collective consciousness of Station Arcturus 7. Marcus received visitors constantly. Crew members from the Crimson Talon came to thank him personally. Throk, the grizzled Korvax engineer, brought him a bottle of expensive Valtorian spirits, strictly prohibited in the medical wing, but Marcus appreciated the gesture. "You shamed me, human," Throk said gruffly. "I left those people to die because I thought the mission mattered more, but you showed me that every life matters, even when it costs everything." "I didn't mean to shame anyone," Marcus said. "I know. That makes it worse." Throck gripped his shoulder carefully. "If I ever hear anyone insult humans again, they'll answer to me. You have my word." Even the young Dralnath technician came by, stammering apologies for his earlier cowardice. Marcus assured him there was nothing to forgive, but the most surprising visitor came on the 7th day. Mrs. Oliveira entered with a delegation of human workers, engineers, janitors, cooks, teachers. They filled the small room, standing shoulder to shoulder. "Marcus," Mrs. Oliveira said, her eyes shining with emotion, "we wanted you to know something. What you did, it matters. It matters to every human on this station. You showed them that we're not weak, that we're not worthless," she smiled. "You gave our children hope." One of the engineers, a young man named Chen, spoke up. "We've been meeting, organizing. We're tired of being treated like vermin. And your example, what you did, it's inspired us to demand better." Marcus felt a surge of alarm. "Don't do anything dangerous. Don't put yourselves at risk." "We won't," Mrs. Oliveira assured him, "but we're not going to be silent anymore either. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." She placed a hand over his. "Because you showed us first." After they left, Marcus lay in his bed, overwhelmed. He'd never wanted to be a symbol. He'd just wanted to do the right thing. But if his suffering could lead to something better for his people, maybe it was worth it. Maybe dying slowly from radiation poisoning was a small price to pay for humanity's dignity. On the 10th day, Marcus was strong enough to sit up and take short walks around the medical wing. The pain was constant now, a dull ache that never quite faded, but he was learning to live with it. He was standing at the window, looking out at the stars, when the door opened behind him. "Dad!" He turned to see Emma standing in the doorway holding a data pad. Tyler was behind her, unusually quiet. "Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Emma held out the data pad with trembling hands. "Mrs. Oliveira gave this to us. She said we should show you." Marcus took the data pad and looked at the screen. It was a news feed from Earth. Not just Earth, but broadcasts from across the human colonies. Every major news outlet was covering the same story. A human engineer saves thousands in station disaster. Marcus Webb, the man who changed everything. Humanity's hero. One man's sacrifice sparks galactic debate. There were images of him, old photos from Earth, recent surveillance footage from the station, interviews with the crew he'd saved, and everywhere the same message: humans were not weak. They were brave. They were worthy. "The whole galaxy is talking about you, Dad," Emma whispered. Marcus stared at the screen, stunned. He'd saved those people because it was right. He'd never imagined it would become this. "Does this mean they won't kick us out?" Tyler asked hopefully. Marcus knelt down slowly, ignoring the pain, and pulled both children close. "I don't know, buddy, but it means we have a chance, a real chance." Emma looked up at him, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, bright with something that looked like pride. "Mom would be proud of you." Marcus felt the tears come. "I hope so, Em. I really hope so." They held each other in the cold medical wing while the galaxy outside began, slowly, to see humanity in a new light. 2 weeks after the Crimson Talon incident, Marcus was released from the medical wing with a list of medications and strict orders to avoid strenuous activity. The doctors gave him an optimistic prognosis of 5 years if he was careful, less if he wasn't. He returned to his small apartment to find it transformed. Someone, he later learned it was a collection of crew members from Krez'thar's ship, had brought gifts. New furniture that actually fit adult-sized humans, a proper kitchen unit, educational tablets for Emma and Tyler loaded with advanced learning programs. There was even a small holoprojector showing images of Earth's forests and oceans. "They brought all this yesterday," Emma explained, her eyes wide. "A Korvax named Krez'thar said you saved his daughter. He wanted to thank you." Marcus stood in the doorway of his own home, overwhelmed. For 3 years he'd scraped by in poverty, working double shifts just to keep food on the table, and now strangers, aliens who'd once mocked him, were helping him. "This is too much," he murmured. "No, Dad," Emma said firmly. "It's not enough, not for what you did." Tyler ran to him and hugged his legs. "Are you staying home now?" Marcus ruffled his son's hair. "For a little while, yeah. Doctor's orders." But he knew he couldn't stay away from work forever. His family needed the income, and more importantly, he needed to feel useful. Sitting around waiting to die wasn't in his nature. 3 days later, Marcus received an official summons. The message was delivered by a council courier, a formal holographic scroll that materialized in his living room. Emma and Tyler watched with wide eyes as Marcus opened it. Marcus Webb, human resident of Station Arcturus 7. The message read in perfect standard galactic. You are hereby summoned to appear before the Galactic Council in 3 days' time to provide testimony regarding recent events. Your presence is mandatory. Transportation and accommodations will be provided. Marcus's hands shook as the hologram dissolved. What does it mean? Emma asked. It means I have to go talk to the council. Marcus tried to keep his voice steady. About what happened on the ship. Will they hurt you? No, sweetheart, they just want to ask questions. But he wasn't entirely sure that was true. The council was unpredictable, and he had no idea what they wanted from him. Was this about the expulsion vote? About humanity's future? Or was it something else entirely? Mrs. Oliveira came by that evening to watch the children while Marcus packed. She gripped his hands tightly. Whatever happens in that chamber, you hold your head high. You represent all of us now. I'm just an engineer, Maria. I'm not a diplomat. You're more than that, and you know it. She smiled sadly. You're our hope, Marcus. Don't forget that. The council chambers were located on Centris Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council. Marcus had never been there before. Few humans had. The planet was a marvel of architecture and technology, with cities that stretched into the clouds and oceans that had been partially terraformed to accommodate dozens of aquatic species. Marcus arrived via shuttle, escorted by 2 council guards who treated him with surprising respect. They led him to a diplomatic suite in the government district, a set of rooms larger than his entire apartment, with a view of the planetary capital that took his breath away. The council convenes tomorrow at midday, one of the guards informed him. Someone will collect you an hour before. Is there anything you require? Marcus shook his head mutely. He spent the evening staring out at the alien city, trying to prepare himself for what was coming. He thought about calling Emma and Tyler, but the time difference meant they'd be asleep. Instead, he recorded a message for them, telling them he loved them and that everything would be okay. He hoped he wasn't lying. The council chamber was even more impressive than Marcus had imagined. It was a massive circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the galaxy, stars swirling overhead in breathtaking complexity. The council members sat in a raised ring around the chamber's perimeter, each on a throne customized for their species. There were 47 seats in total, representing the major powers of the galaxy. Marcus stood alone in the center of the chamber, feeling impossibly small. War Matron Krez'thar sat in the Dralnath throne, her armor gleaming. She met his eyes briefly, and he thought he saw the faintest nod of encouragement. The High Arbiter, an ancient Valtorian with silver skin so pale it was almost white, called the session to order. We are here to address the matter of humanity's continued membership in this council, and to hear testimony regarding recent events on Station Arcturus 7. His voice echoed through the chamber. Marcus Webb, human engineer, you have been called to provide your account. Speak truthfully, for the future of your species may depend on your words. No pressure, Marcus thought grimly. He cleared his throat. Honored council members, I'm not sure what you want me to say. I did what anyone would have done. That is precisely the issue, a Threne councillor interrupted, his mandibles clicking sharply. What you did is not what anyone would have done. Most beings would have prioritized their own survival. You did not. Why? Marcus hesitated. Because people were in danger, and I could help. Even though helping them would cost you your life. I didn't think about the cost. I just thought about the people trapped in that ship. A Korvax councillor leaned forward. You are dying now, are you not? Radiation poisoning. Yes. Was it worth it? Marcus thought of Emma and Tyler. Thought of the years he'd now never see. Their graduations, their weddings, grandchildren he'd never meet. The pain lanced through him, sharp and bitter. Yes, he said quietly. It was worth it. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some council members looked moved. Others looked skeptical. The High Arbiter raised a hand for silence. War Matron Krez'thar has requested permission to speak on this matter. Krez'thar rose from her throne, and the chamber fell silent. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. For decades I have argued that humans are weak, that they have no place among the warrior races of this galaxy, that compassion and empathy are signs of inferiority. She paused. I was wrong. Shocked whispers rippled through the chamber. I have witnessed true strength, Krez'thar continued. Not the strength of muscles or weapons, but the strength of character. Marcus Webb walked into certain death to save my crew, beings who had shown him nothing but contempt. He asked for no reward. He expected no gratitude. He simply acted because it was right. She turned to face Marcus directly. That is a courage I have never possessed, a strength I have never known. The Threen Counselor spoke up. With respect, Matrona, one act of bravery does not prove the worth of an entire species. You are correct, Krez'thar agreed. One act proves nothing. But this was not an isolated incident. Since the Crimson Talon rescue, I have been investigating humanity. Do you know what I found? She gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing images and data. On Colony World Theta 7, when a plague swept through the Korvax population, it was human doctors who stayed behind to treat the sick while other species evacuated. On Mining Station Omega 3, when a structural collapse trapped 12 Threen workers, it was human engineers who dug them out with their bare hands. On the border worlds, where pirate raids are common, it is often human civilians who organize refugee relief and medical care. More images appeared, humans helping aliens, protecting them, saving them. This species, Krez'thar said, her voice ringing through the chamber, has been among us for barely 50 years. And in that time, they have proven again and again that they possess something we have forgotten, the willingness to sacrifice for strangers, the capacity to see someone in need and help them even when it costs everything. She turned back to the Council. I have conquered worlds. I have commanded fleets. I have killed thousands in battle, but I have never done what Marcus Webb did, and I am ashamed of that. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The High Arbiter spoke carefully. You are proposing, then, that humanity's membership be confirmed? I am proposing more than that, Krez'thar said. I am proposing that we acknowledge what humans bring to this council that no other species does, the moral courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it is costly. She looked around the chamber. We measure worth in military strength, in technological advancement, in economic power, but perhaps we have been measuring the wrong things. A Dralnath councillor stood, his armor clanking. The Matrona speaks with passion, but passion is not policy. What concrete benefit do humans provide? They remind us that we are more than conquerors, Krez'thar said simply. They remind us that mercy is not weakness, that compassion is not failure, and they show us every day how to be better than we are. Marcus stood, frozen, listening to the most feared warrior in the galaxy defend his species with words he'd never expected to hear. The High Arbiter consulted with his fellow councillors in hushed tones. Minutes passed. Marcus's legs ached, but he didn't dare sit. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. The Council will vote on humanity's continued membership, but first, Marcus Webb, you will answer one final question. Marcus straightened. Yes, Arbiter? If you could go back to that moment on the Crimson Talon, knowing what it would cost you, would you still enter that radiation tunnel? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because my children are watching. Because every human child is watching. And I want them to learn that we don't measure our worth by how strong we are or how much power we have. We measure it by how we treat others when no one is watching. He looked around the chamber. I want them to know that being human means something, that we're not weak just because we're kind, that we're not worthless just because we're small. His voice grew stronger. You can vote us out of this council. You can send us back to Earth. You can decide we're not worthy, but you can't change what we are, and what we are is a species that believes every life matters, that believes in helping each other, that believes the strongest thing you can do is stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. He met the High Arbiter's eyes. So yes, I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times, because that's what humans do. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, Krez'thar began to applaud. One by one, other council members joined her. Not all of them. Some sat stone-faced, unmoved, but enough that the sound filled the vast chamber, echoing off the dome above. Marcus stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down his face, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd done enough. The council vote was scheduled for the following day. Marcus returned to his diplomatic suite exhausted, emotionally drained and uncertain. The applause had been encouraging, but he'd seen the faces of those who hadn't joined in. The Threen delegation, several Korvax councillors, a faction of Dralnath who clearly disagreed with Krez'thar's position. The vote could go either way. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. Instead, he stood at the window, watching the alien city lights pulse and shimmer in the darkness, and thought about his children. What would happen to Emma and Tyler if humanity was expelled? Would they be forced back to an overcrowded, resource-depleted Earth? Would they grow up hating him for sacrificing their future for strangers? A chime at his door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Krez'thar standing in the hallway. Without her ceremonial armor, dressed in simple combat fatigues, she looked almost ordinary. Almost. She still had to duck to enter his suite. "War Matron," Marcus said, surprised. "I didn't expect—" "We need to talk," Krez'thar said, her voice unusually quiet. "And you need to hear something that very few beings in this galaxy know." Marcus gestured to the sitting area, and they sat. Krez'thar in a reinforced chair designed for larger species, Marcus on the edge of a couch. "I told you I investigated humanity after you saved my ship," Krez'thar began. "What I didn't tell the Council is what else I discovered." She leaned forward, her golden eyes intense. "Marcus Webb, do you know why humans were allowed into the Galactic Council at all?" "The history books say it was because we developed faster-than-light travel independently," Marcus said. "That made us eligible for membership." "That's the official story. It's also a lie." Krez'thar's expression was grim. "The truth is far more complicated, and it involves you personally." Marcus blinked. "Me? How could it possibly involve me? What do you know about your family history?" The question threw him. "Not much. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother until I was 16. She never talked much about the past." "Your grandmother's name was Elizabeth Webb, yes?" "Yes, how do you—" "Elizabeth Webb was not just a grandmother, Marcus. She was one of the founding members of humanity's first contact team. One of the 12 humans who met with Galactic Council representatives 60 years ago." Krez'thar pulled out a datapad and showed him an image. Marcus stared at the photograph. It showed a young woman in her 30s, standing among a group of humans and aliens. She wore a diplomatic uniform and her face— "That's her," Marcus whispered. "That's my grandmother." "She was brilliant," Krez'thar said. "A linguist, a diplomat, and according to the records, the one human the Council representatives actually respected. When negotiations stalled, it was Elizabeth Webb who found common ground. When cultural misunderstandings threatened to derail everything, she was the one who bridged the gap." Marcus's mind reeled. His grandmother had never mentioned any of this. She'd lived modestly on Earth, in a small house in the countryside, raising him on a teacher's pension. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she was protecting you." Krez'thar's voice was gentle. "Marcus, your grandmother didn't just negotiate humanity's entry into the Council. She negotiated the terms, and one of those terms was controversial." "What do you mean?" Krez'thar stood and walked to the window, her massive frame silhouetted against the city lights. "The Council had conditions for accepting humanity. They wanted assurances that humans wouldn't become a threat, that you would remain in subordinate roles until you proved yourselves worthy." She said the last words with barely concealed contempt. "Your grandmother argued against it. She said humans should be given equal status from the beginning, but the Council refused. So she accepted their terms." "No, she proposed an alternative." Krez'thar turned back to him. "She made a wager." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of wager?" "She bet that within 3 generations humanity would produce someone who would demonstrate the true nature of human strength. Someone who would save lives at the cost of their own. Someone who would show the galaxy that humans were worthy, not because of power but because of character." Krez'thar's eyes bore into him. "If this happened, the Council would be bound to acknowledge humanity's full membership and grant equal status. If it didn't, humanity would accept subordinate status permanently." Marcus couldn't breathe. "That's insane. Why would she agree to that?" "Because she believed in her species, and because the alternative was rejection entirely." Krez'thar sat down again. "The Council agreed, thinking it was impossible. What species willingly sacrifices their own for strangers? It went against every evolutionary instinct, every survival mechanism. They thought humans would eventually show their true nature. Selfish, weak, concerned only with self-preservation. But I didn't know," Marcus said, his voice rising. "I didn't know about any wager. I just did what felt right." "Exactly." Krez'thar smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "That's what makes it meaningful. You didn't act to win a bet or secure your species' future. You acted because it was right, just as your grandmother knew you would." "How could she know? She died when I was 16. I was nobody, just a kid." "She knew because she raised you. She saw the kind of man you were becoming. And before she died, she registered your name with the Council archives as her designated successor." Krez'thar pulled up another document on the datapad. "It's all here." Elizabeth Webb, in her final year, filed a formal declaration that her grandson, Marcus Webb, embodied the qualities humanity would be judged by. Marcus stared at the document, his grandmother's signature at the bottom. His vision blurred with tears. She believed in you, Krez'thar said softly, even before you believed in yourself. But I'm dying, Marcus choked out. I saved those people, but now I'm leaving my children alone. How is that? Heroism always costs something, Krez'thar interrupted. That's what makes it heroism. Your grandmother understood that. She knew that true strength requires sacrifice. She leaned closer, and she knew that even in death you would change everything. Marcus buried his face in his hands. All those years his grandmother had told him to be kind, to help others, to never let cruelty make him cruel in return. He'd thought she was just teaching basic morality, but she'd been preparing him. Why are you telling me this now, he asked. Because tomorrow the Council votes on humanity's future, and you deserve to know what's really at stake. Krez'thar stood. Your grandmother's wager comes due tomorrow. The Council must decide whether what you did fulfills the terms she set 60 years ago. And if they decide it doesn't, then humanity remains subordinate forever. Your children and their children will live as second-class citizens in a galaxy that sees them as inferior. Krez'thar walked toward the door, then paused. But I don't think that will happen. Why not? She looked back at him, and her expression was something Marcus had never seen before. Respect. Because you didn't just save my crew, Marcus. You saved me. You showed me that I've been wrong about everything that matters. And if you could change the mind of the most stubborn warrior in the galaxy, you can change the Council's mind too. She left, and Marcus was alone with the weight of 3 generations pressing down on him. His grandmother had bet humanity's entire future on him, on the belief that he would do the right thing when it mattered most. And he had. But at what cost? Marcus didn't sleep that night. Instead, he recorded messages for Emma and Tyler. Long messages explaining everything. The wager, their great-grandmother's faith, the choice he'd made, and why. I know I'm leaving you too soon, he said into the camera, tears streaming down his face. I know you'll be angry and scared, and you'll think I chose strangers over you, but that's not what happened. I chose to show you what it means to be human, to be someone who helps, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. He wiped his eyes. Your great-grandmother believed that humans were special, not because we're stronger or smarter than other species, but because we care, because we'll risk everything to save someone we don't even know. And I really hope, that I proved she was right. He ended the recording and sat in the darkness, waiting for dawn. The council chamber was packed the next day. Word had spread about the true nature of the vote, and diplomats from every member species crowded the observation galleries. Marcus saw human faces in the crowd, workers from stations across the galaxy, brought here to witness this moment. He stood in the center of the chamber again, but this time he wasn't alone. Krez'thar stood beside him, a show of support that sent murmurs through the crowd. The High Arbiter called for silence. We are here to render judgment on the wager made by Elizabeth Webb 60 years ago. The terms were clear. Humanity would be granted full equal status in this council if they demonstrated that their strength lay not in power, but in character, that they would sacrifice for others without expectation of reward. He looked at Marcus. The council has reviewed the evidence. We have heard testimony. We have examined the records of human actions across the galaxy, and now we must vote. The High Arbiter raised his hand. Those in favor of recognizing humanity's fulfillment of the wager and granting full council status. Signal now. Lights began to appear above council seats. 1, 2, 5, 10. Marcus held his breath. Krez'thar's light blazed crimson, bright and unwavering. More lights joined. 20, 25, 30. But others remained dark. The Threen delegation, several Korvax councillors, a handful of others who still believed humans were unworthy. The count climbed. 35, 38, 40. They needed a 2/3 majority. 32 votes. 41, 42. Marcus felt dizzy. They were so close. The final lights flickered, hesitating, and then 3 more blazed to life. 45 votes in favor. The High Arbiter's voice rang out. The vote is decided. Humanity has fulfilled the terms of Elizabeth Webb's wager. By formal decree of this council, humans are hereby granted full, equal status as members of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The chamber erupted. The human observers in the galleries screamed and cheered and wept. Marcus sank to his knees, overwhelmed. Krez'thar placed a massive hand on his shoulder, steadying him. You did it, she said quietly. Your grandmother would be proud. Marcus looked up at her through tears. We did it. You changed their minds. No, Krez'thar said. You changed mine. I simply shared what I learned. The High Arbiter waited for the noise to subside, then spoke again. Marcus Webb, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our deepest gratitude. You have honored your species and reminded us all what true strength means. Marcus tried to stand, and Krez'thar helped him up. There is one more matter, the High Arbiter said. Your sacrifice has not gone unnoticed. The Council Medical Division has been researching your condition, and they believe they may have a treatment. It will not cure you, but it could extend your life considerably. Marcus's heart stopped. How long? Possibly decades. The treatment is expensive and experimental, but the Council has voted to cover all costs. The High Arbiter smiled, a rare expression. Consider it payment of a debt long overdue. Marcus couldn't speak. He could only nod, the tears flowing freely now. He would see his children grow up. He would be there for Emma's graduation, for Tyler's first job. He would have time, not forever, but time, and that was more than he'd dared to hope for. Marcus returned to Station Arcturus 7 3 weeks later, after beginning his treatment on Centris Prime. The medical procedures were exhausting: cellular regeneration therapy, genetic reconstruction, radiation purging at the molecular level. The doctors warned him he'd never be completely healthy again, but the progress was remarkable. The constant pain had diminished to a manageable ache. His energy was returning. He could breathe without feeling like his lungs were burning. Most importantly, the doctors projected he had at least 20 years, maybe 30 if he was careful. 20 years to watch Emma and Tyler grow up, to see them become the people his grandmother had believed all humans could be. When his shuttle docked at the station, Marcus expected to slip back quietly to his apartment. Instead, he found a crowd waiting at the arrival gate. Human workers filled the corridor. Engineers, janitors, teachers, cooks, families with children. They held signs written in a dozen languages. Welcome home, Marcus. Humanity's hero. We are proud. Mrs. Oliveira stood at the front, with Emma and Tyler. His children broke from the crowd and ran to him, and Marcus dropped to his knees, ignoring the doctor's warnings about sudden movements, and caught them in his arms. "Dad!" Emma sobbed into his shoulder. "You're home. You're really home." "I told you I'd come back," Marcus murmured, holding them so tight he was afraid he might break them. Tyler pulled back and looked at him seriously. "Are you still sick?" "A little bit, but I'm getting better." Marcus smiled. "And I'm going to be here for a long, long time. Promise?" "Promise." The crowd surged forward, and suddenly Marcus was surrounded by people shaking his hand, patting his back, thanking him. It was overwhelming and embarrassing, and deeply moving all at once. Mrs. Oliveira eventually rescued him, ushering him and the children through the crowd toward the human residential sector. But even the walk home was different. Aliens in the corridors, Korvax, Threen, Valtorians, stopped and nodded respectfully as he passed. Some even spoke to him. "Thank you for what you did," a Korvax security officer said quietly. "My sister was on the Crimson Talon," a Threen merchant added. "You saved her life." Marcus didn't know what to say except thank you over and over, until the words felt meaningless. When they finally reached his apartment, still filled with the gifts from before, Marcus collapsed onto the couch and let himself simply exist for a moment. Emma curled up on one side of him, Tyler on the other, and they sat in comfortable silence. "Dad," Emma said eventually, "Mrs. Oliveira told us about Great-Grandma, about the wager." Marcus tensed. "Did she?" "Yeah. She said Great-Grandma knew you'd be a hero." Emma looked up at him. "Did you know?" "No, sweetheart. I had no idea." "But you did it anyway," Tyler piped up. "You saved everyone even though you didn't know about the wager." "That's right." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think that's why Great-Grandma picked you, because you would have done it anyway." Marcus felt his throat tighten. His 10-year-old daughter understood something profound, something he was still trying to fully grasp. "Yeah, Em, I think you're right. Are we really equal now?" Tyler asked. "Like for real equal?" "For real equal," Marcus confirmed. "The council voted. Humans have full membership now. Same rights as every other species." "So no more people calling us weak?" Marcus hesitated. "Some people might still think that. Changing minds takes time, but officially, legally, we're equal. And that's a start." Emma snuggled closer. "I'm glad you didn't die, Dad." "Me too, baby. Me too." Over the following weeks, Marcus witnessed changes throughout the station that would have been unthinkable months before. The human residential sector received funding for upgrades, better living quarters, a proper school facility, improved infrastructure. Human workers were being promoted to supervisory positions. The casual discrimination that had been so pervasive began to fade as aliens realized there would be consequences for mistreating council members. It wasn't perfect. Old prejudices died hard, but it was progress. Marcus returned to work after a month, though his duties had changed dramatically. He was no longer crawling through maintenance tunnels. Instead, he'd been promoted to Chief Engineering Supervisor for the entire station, a position that had never been held by a human before. His first day back, he arrived at the engineering bay to find his new team assembled. 15 engineers from 6 different species, all waiting to meet him. Among them was Throck, the grizzled Korvax who'd been on the Crimson Talon. "Webb," Throck rumbled, extending his massive hand. "I requested assignment to your team. Hope you don't mind." Marcus shook his hand, grinning. "Mind? I'd be honored. Don't get sentimental on me," Throck said gruffly. "I just figure if I'm going to work under someone, it might as well be the one being in this station who's braver than I am." The other engineers laughed, and Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest. Acceptance, respect, things he'd never expected to find here. His first project as supervisor was overseeing repairs to the Crimson Talon, which was still docked at the station undergoing extensive reconstruction. Marcus walked through the ship with his team, marking damaged sections and planning the work. It was strange being back in these corridors where he'd nearly died. "This is where you opened the valves," Throck said quietly as they stood in the sub-level access tunnel. "I came down here after. The radiation levels were enough to kill most species in seconds. You were down here for nearly 10 minutes. Marcus looked at the valves, remembering the searing pain, the blood dripping from his nose, the certainty that he was going to die. "I wasn't thinking about the radiation. I was just thinking about stopping the reactor. That's what makes it extraordinary," Throck said. "Anyone can be brave when they don't understand the danger, but you knew, and you did it anyway." Marcus didn't have a response to that. He simply nodded and moved on. 2 months after his return, Marcus received an invitation that stunned him. War Matron Krez'thar requested his presence aboard her flagship for a formal ceremony. He arrived to find the Crimson Talon fully repaired and gleaming. The crew lined the corridors, standing at attention as he passed. It was deeply uncomfortable. He was just an engineer, not a dignitary, but he endured it. Krez'thar met him in the main assembly hall, where the entire senior staff had gathered. She wore her full ceremonial armor, and the hall was decorated with the banners of the Dralnath Empire. "Marcus Webb," Krez'thar said formally, her voice carrying through the hall. "You stand before the crew of the Crimson Talon, the beings whose lives you saved. We have gathered to honor you in the tradition of my people." She gestured, and 2 Dralnath warriors approached carrying a long object wrapped in crimson cloth. They knelt before Marcus and unwrapped it. It was a sword, not a human sword. This was a Dralnath honor blade, nearly 6 feet long, its edge gleaming with an almost blue sheen. The hilt was wrapped in black leather, and the crossguard bore the crest of Krez'thar's house. "This blade has been in my family for 17 generations, Krez'thar said. "It has drawn the blood of 100 enemies. It represents strength, honor, and courage." She stepped forward and lifted the blade, then knelt before Marcus, an act so shocking that gasps echoed through the hall. A war matron never knelt, not to anyone. "I present this blade to you, Marcus Webb, as a symbol of the strength you have shown, the strength we failed to recognize, the strength that saved us all." She held the blade out. "Will you accept it?" Marcus stared at the weapon, overwhelmed. "Matrona, I can't. This is too much." "You can and you will," Krez'thar said firmly. "You taught me that strength comes in many forms. This blade represents one form, the strength of warriors. But I want it carried by someone who understands all forms of strength, someone who knows when to fight and when to save, someone who embodies what strength truly means." Marcus's hands shook as he took the blade. It was heavier than he expected, but balanced perfectly. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. "I don't know what to say," Marcus whispered. "Say you'll carry it with honor. Say you'll remind us whenever we see it that we once measured worth incorrectly." Krez'thar stood, and the hall erupted in applause, thunderous, genuine, lasting. Marcus stood holding a 17-generation-old Dralnath honor blade, a human engineer from Earth, and felt the weight of everything his grandmother had hoped for settling onto his shoulders. He was not just Marcus anymore. He was a symbol, a bridge between species, a living reminder that the galaxy had been wrong about humanity. It was a responsibility he hadn't asked for, but he would carry it, just as he carried this blade, for Emma and Tyler, for his grandmother, for every human who'd ever been called weak. That evening, Marcus returned to his apartment with the blade carefully wrapped. Emma and Tyler's eyes went wide when he showed it to them. "That's the biggest sword I've ever seen," Tyler exclaimed. "Can you even lift it?" Emma asked skeptically. Marcus smiled and hefted the blade one-handed. It was heavy, but manageable. Barely. "Why did she give it to you?" "To remind me, and everyone else, that strength isn't just about fighting, it's about choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard." He set the blade down carefully. "This sword has a long history. Warriors carried it into battle. They used it to protect their people. And now I'm supposed to carry it as a symbol that humans deserve respect." "That's a lot of pressure," Emma said quietly. "Yeah, it is." Marcus pulled both children close. "But you know what? I don't have to carry it alone. Every time I look at this sword, I'm going to think about you two, about how you give me strength, about how you remind me why I do what I do." Tyler touched the blade carefully. "It's pretty cool." "It is pretty cool," Marcus agreed. "But you know what's cooler? The fact that we, all of us, all humans, we changed the galaxy's mind. We showed them that we're not weak, that we matter, and that's something no sword can do by itself." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, both of you." Marcus kissed the tops of their heads. "We're going to have a good life here, I promise." And for the first time in years, Marcus believed it. The galaxy had judged humanity and found them worthy. His grandmother's faith had been vindicated. His children had a future. The cost had been high. His health, years of his life, the constant pain he'd carry forever. But sitting here with Emma and Tyler, a priceless honor blade resting against the wall, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Every single moment of suffering had been worth this peace. 20 years passed. Marcus Webb stood at the observation window of Station Arcturus 7, now vastly expanded from the station he'd first arrived at 2 decades ago. His hair was mostly grey now, and the lines on his face told the story of a life hard-lived but well spent. The chronic pain from his radiation exposure had never fully disappeared, but he'd learned to live with it. The medical treatments had worked better than anyone expected. He'd made it to 63, and the doctors said he might have another decade if he was lucky. He'd take it. Every extra day was a gift. Behind him, the station's main plaza bustled with activity. Humans walked freely among dozens of alien species, working together, laughing together, living together. Human children played in the parks alongside Korvax's younglings and Threen hatchlings. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable when Marcus first arrived. "Dad?" He turned to see Emma approaching, now 30 years old, and breathtakingly beautiful in her diplomatic uniform. She'd followed in her great-grandmother's footsteps, becoming one of humanity's most effective ambassadors. Currently, she served as humanity's representative to the Outer Rim territories, negotiating trade agreements and peace treaties. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus said, embracing her carefully. His bones were more fragile these days. "I didn't know you were coming back to the station. I wanted to surprise you." Emma smiled, and he saw Sarah in that smile. Always Sarah, even after all these years. "Tyler's on his way too. He's bringing the kids." Marcus felt his heart swell. Tyler had become an engineer like his father, but had taken it further. He now designed entire station systems, revolutionary environmental technology that was being implemented across the galaxy. And he'd married a Valtorian woman named Sereth, producing 3 beautiful hybrid children who called Marcus Grandpa in 2 languages. "All of them?" Marcus asked hopefully. "All of them. Mara's been asking when she gets to see your sword again." Marcus chuckled. His granddaughter had developed a fascination with Krez'thar's honor blade, which hung in a place of honor in his apartment. He'd promised to give it to her when she was old enough to understand its significance. "There's something else," Emma said, her expression growing serious. "The council has called a special session tomorrow. They've asked you to attend." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Me? Why? I'm retired." "They wouldn't say. But it's important enough that they're bringing in counselors from across the galaxy." Emma squeezed his hand. "Whatever it is, I'll be there with you." The next day, Marcus arrived at the council chambers, now located on Station Arcturus 7, which had become a major diplomatic hub, with Emma, Tyler, and his entire family. The galleries were packed with observers from every species. As Marcus entered the main chamber, he saw familiar faces. Throck, now elderly himself, nodded from the engineering section. Mrs. Oliveira, ancient but still teaching, waved from the human delegation. And there, dominating the Dralnath throne, sat Krez'thar. She'd aged too. Her crimson skin had faded slightly, and scars from recent battles marked her armor. But her golden eyes were as fierce as ever, and when she saw Marcus, she inclined her head in respect, a gesture she'd never offered anyone else in public. The High Arbiter, a new one now, a young Korvax named Velthara, called the session to order. We are gathered for a historic purpose. 20 years ago, humanity was granted full membership in this council based on the fulfillment of Elizabeth Webb's wager. Today we recognize not only what that decision meant, but what humanity has contributed since. Holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing images and data. Human doctors had developed breakthrough treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple species for generations. Human engineers had designed safer, more efficient systems for space travel. Human diplomats had negotiated peace treaties between species that had been at war for centuries. Human teachers had educated thousands of alien children, spreading knowledge and understanding across the galaxy. And everywhere, in every field, humans had brought something the galaxy had been missing, the willingness to help without asking what they'd get in return. Humanity has proven, Velthara continued, that Elizabeth Webb was not merely right about her grandson, she was right about her entire species. Humans have shown us that strength, intelligence, and value are not measured by the standards we once held. They are measured by character, compassion, and courage. The High Arbiter gestured, and Krez'thar rose from her throne. She descended to the chamber floor and approached Marcus directly. "Marcus Webb," she said, her voice filling the chamber. 20 years ago, you changed my mind about everything I believed. You taught me that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the willingness to sacrifice for others. Since that day, I have studied your species extensively. I have fought alongside humans. I have learned from them. And I have come to understand something profound. She turned to address the full council. Humanity was never weak. We were simply blind to the kind of strength they possessed. They are not warriors like the Dralnath. They are not as technologically advanced as the Valtorians. They are not as long-lived as the Korvax. But they possess something rarer and more valuable than any of these gifts. Krez'thar looked back at Marcus. They possess the ability to see someone suffering and say, "I will help no matter the cost." That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength. The chamber was utterly silent. Therefore, Krez'thar continued, I propose that the Council establish a new honor in recognition of Marcus Webb's sacrifice and humanity's contributions. Let it be known as the Webb Commendation, awarded to any being of any species who demonstrates extraordinary courage in the service of others. Let it stand as a reminder that we measure greatness not by conquest, but by compassion. The Council erupted in applause, every species, every representative, rising to their feet. Velthara called for a vote, and the measure passed unanimously. Marcus stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Behind him he heard Emma sobbing. Tyler's hand gripped his shoulder. Marcus Webb, Velthara said formally, you are the first recipient of the Webb Commendation. May your example inspire generations yet to come. Krez'thar approached him and placed something in his hands, a small medallion bearing the symbol of two hands clasped together, one human and one Dralnath. Thank you, she said quietly, for his ears alone, for teaching this old warrior that there was more to life than battle. You gave me a purpose beyond conquest. You showed me what it means to truly protect others. Marcus could barely speak. You honored my grandmother's faith. That's all I wanted. You did more than that. You changed the galaxy. Krez'thar straightened, and in a gesture that shocked everyone present, she knelt before him one final time. I name you friend, Marcus Webb, the first and only being I have ever given this title. Marcus helped her stand, and they embraced. Human and Dralnath, two beings who'd started as symbols of their species' differences and had become proof of what they could be together. That evening, Marcus sat with his entire family in his apartment. Emma and Tyler, his 3 grandchildren, even Sereth, his Valtorian daughter-in-law. The Dralnath honor blade hung on the wall above them, catching the light. Grandpa, Mara asked, tell us the story again, about the ship and the radiation. Marcus smiled. Which part? The part where you decided to go down into the tunnel, when you knew it would kill you. Marcus looked at the young faces around him, human and hybrid, the next generation who would inherit the galaxy he'd helped change. I was scared, he said honestly. More scared than I'd ever been. I knew what the radiation would do to me. I knew I might never see you again, well, your dad and aunt at the time. But you went anyway, Tyler's son, Marcus Jr. said. Why? Because I thought about what kind of galaxy I wanted you to grow up in. Not a galaxy where we only help people who look like us or talk like us or come from the same planet as us, but a galaxy where everyone matters, where we help each other because it's right. Marcus met each of their eyes. I wanted you to be proud of being human, and the only way to do that was to show everyone, including ourselves, what humans are capable of. Did it hurt? Mara asked quietly. Yes, very much. And I still hurt sometimes, even now. Do you wish you hadn't done it? Marcus thought about the question carefully. He thought about the pain, the years of suffering, the treatments, the knowledge that he'd die sooner than he should have. Then he looked around the room at his family, at the life they had, at the opportunities they'd been given. No, he said firmly. I don't wish that at all. Because of what I did, what we all did, you can be anything you want in this galaxy. You can be diplomats or engineers or artists or explorers. You can marry whoever you love, regardless of species. You can walk through any station in this galaxy with your head held high, knowing that you're valued and respected. He pulled them all close. That's worth any amount of pain. That's worth everything. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. Great-Grandma Elizabeth would be proud. She'd be proud of all of us, Marcus said. She bet on humanity, and we proved her right. Not just me, every human who's worked hard, who's shown compassion, who's stood up for what's right. We did this together. Tyler raised his glass. To Great-Grandma Elizabeth, who believed in us before we believed in ourselves. To Marcus Webb, who proved her right, Emma added. To humanity, Sarah said quietly, her silver skin gleaming in the light. Who taught the galaxy what strength truly means? They toasted together, multiple species, multiple generations, united by love and the legacy of one man who'd chosen to do the right thing when it cost him everything. Marcus Webb died peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, at the age of 66. He was surrounded by his family, and his last words were, "Tell them I'm proud. Tell them they made it all worthwhile." The funeral was the largest in galactic history. Representatives from every council species attended. War Matron Krez'thar delivered the eulogy, her voice breaking for the first time in public as she described the human who'd changed her life. Marcus Webb was not the strongest being I ever met, she said. He was not the smartest, or the longest lived, or the most powerful, but he was the bravest, and in the end, that made all the difference. His body was returned to Earth, buried beside his wife Sarah and his grandmother Elizabeth in a simple grave that bore only his name and dates. But his legacy spread across the galaxy. The Webb Commendation became the highest civilian honor any being could receive, awarded yearly to those who demonstrated extraordinary selfless courage. Humans continued to rise in prominence throughout the Council, not through force or manipulation, but through the same compassion and determination Marcus had shown. Emma went on to negotiate the treaty that ended the Outer Rim Wars, saving billions of lives. Tyler's environmental technology became the standard across the galaxy, ensuring cleaner air and water for countless worlds. His grandchildren, human and hybrid, grew up to become leaders, teachers, healers, and heroes in their own right. And the Dralnath Honor Blade, 17 generations old, was passed to Mara Webb on her 18th birthday. She carried it not as a weapon, but as a reminder, just as Marcus had, that true strength comes from the heart. 50 years after Marcus Webb's death, Station Arcturus 7 unveiled a statue in the main plaza. It depicted a man of average height, wearing a simple engineering jumpsuit, holding a tool in one hand and reaching out with the other, as if to help someone up. The inscription at the base read, "Marcus Webb, first recipient of the Webb Commendation. He taught us that the measure of a being is not in their strength, but in their willingness to sacrifice for others. May we all aspire to such courage." Children, human, Dralnath, Korvax, Threen, Valtorian, and dozens of other species, played around the statue every day. They climbed on it, hid behind it, used it as a meeting place. It was exactly what Marcus would have wanted. Not a monument to war or conquest, but a gathering place for children of all species, learning to live and play together in the galaxy their grandparents had built. Elizabeth Webb's wager had paid off beyond her wildest dreams. Humanity had not just survived in the galaxy, they'd transformed it. They'd shown that strength came in many forms, and that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or technology. It was compassion. It was the willingness to help a stranger, It was the courage to do the right thing even when it cost everything. That was the legacy of Marcus Webb. That was the triumph of humanity. And the galaxy would never forget. The end.